Okay, and I can see that the session is now being recorded, so you guys will have this as a reference after the session's been completed if you wanted to look back on it. So, hi, welcome. Thank you everybody for joining us today. It's been really nice seeing everybody arrive and, you know, tell me where they're from. And we seem to be scanning most of the globe in this session, which is really lovely to see. It's kind of bittersweet as well, being stuck where we are at the moment and having these travel restrictions. But it's really such a wonderful thing that we can all come together for events like this. And I know that the ELT Together event has seen many participants from all over the globe come together. So yes, I really feel very honoured to be part of this and to have you all with me today. So as Lucia said, my name is Charlotte Murphy. I'm based in the UK and I work for Oxford University Press as a senior consultant and teacher trainer. But prior to working for OUP, I was a teacher like yourselves. So it's really lovely to do these sessions and connect with so many teachers and reminisce on what it was like for me when I was in the classroom, and to hear from you guys and to hear, you know, how you're dealing with everything that's taking place at the moment. So I'm just going to turn on my web camera so you can all see me, and hopefully it won't cause any issues, but if it does, I might have to turn it up at some point. So welcome to the session. Before we get started and before I tell you too much about what we're going to be covering today, I'd really like it if you guys could do a poll for me. So Lucia is just going to bring a poll up onto your screen, and I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to pop your responses into this poll. And this will really give me a great idea about your attitudes and thoughts towards teaching advanced learners, if you are teaching advanced learners, that is. And be honest, give me your honest response. It's completely anonymous, so, you know, however you feel, don't be afraid to pop it down. So I can see we've got 520 attendees, which is quite incredible. I think we've had about 200 people respond. So I'll just give you another minute just to have a think about what your response might be. You just vote using the poll, guys, not in the chat box, just on the poll. Okay. So we have around sort of 68% have put excitement. So you can try out new challenges at this level. So they're your general thoughts towards teaching advanced learners. We've got about 27% anxiety. I might not have the knowledge base needed for this level. And yes, I totally understand that. 3% say uninspiring. I quickly run out of lessons and activities at this level. And then we have 2% who are indifferent. They don't think teaching advanced level is any different to teaching other levels. And I don't think anyone's put a no vote, which is good to see. Okay, brilliant. So if I broadcast the results for you guys to see, hopefully, Lucia, that's worked by ticking that box. But we're going to revisit this at the end of the session. So thank you very much, everybody, for sharing your results. Okay, so I'm going to remove the poll now and introduce the session for you guys. So throughout this session on advanced learners, we are going to be talking about teacher anxiety. We're going to be having a look at learner fatigue. And we're going to be focusing on what we call the learner plateau. So these are the main bases for the areas that we will explore, and these will all feed into ideas on how we can implement practical solutions to help overcome these hurdles when we're teaching an advanced class. And I just want to say as well that this talk will be drawing on our focus paper by Amanda Jeffries, which is called Teaching Advanced Learners. Can you just pop a yes in the chat box if you're already familiar with our focus papers or if you've accessed them before? A yes or a no would be great. Okay. So some people, yes, I'm aware, but I haven't used them yet. Lots of no's, which is quite good in a way, because now I can tell you about them. So for those of you who aren't familiar with our focus papers, these are free to access. They're free to access from our Oxford Teachers Club, and they offer insights and practical tips into the ELT classroom. So these could be things that could help you to feel confident teaching advanced students, help them move from their comfort zones, help them to progress in their learning. They can help to challenge and inspire learners with fresh topics and activities. So we give you ideas for that. And also talk about how we can make progress visible and help students go beyond the learning plateau, which we'll be talking about in some more detail later on in the session. So as I said, these are free to access, these focus papers. This is just one example of one of the focus papers that we have available. There's a link there, but I will be providing a link again at the end. So don't worry for now if you're not able to access that. We can put the link maybe in the chat box at the end. Oh, there we go. Lucy has popped it in the chat box already. So I really encourage you guys to take a look at the focus papers. They're really, really useful, really, really handy for teachers and free to access. So a really great resource and further support from Oxford University Press. Anyway, let's get started. So in the chat box, guys, I would like you to please type some areas of teacher anxiety that maybe you have experienced when teaching advanced learners, or maybe areas that you think might cause teacher anxiety if you're not too familiar with teaching advanced learners. So any feedback you have here. Phrasal verbs, grammar, fall short of the expectation. Yes, yeah, I know that's a really good point. Material not challenging enough, Sheena, yes. Karma, not fully prepared, yep. My goodness, there's so many responses. I'm trying to keep my eyes up with them all. I can see Dora's put finding materials, yeah. Flavia, difficult vocabulary, idioms. Yeah, we're actually going to talk about that in the session. That's funny that you brought that up. Zin, to motivate them. Losing enthusiasm. New words, yeah. They need a constant challenge, Anna, yeah. Mohammed, not finding suitable material. Very good. Unable to explain grammar and idioms. So idioms is coming up a lot, interesting. Idioms again. Marta, yeah. Okay, thank you guys. That's some really great feedback. And a lot of you have actually brought up some areas that we will be talking about later on in the session. But for now, let's just have a look at 4 areas that I pulled up when I thought about teacher anxiety, teaching advanced learners. So this is something that a lot of you have mentioned. It's hard to find challenging materials at this level. I think this is something that lots of teachers concern themselves with when teaching advanced learners. Jana's put very much so, yeah, but yes, that's true, Jana. This teacher, I'm not sure my English is good enough. This may be a concern of yours. My students might have higher expectations for lessons at this level. This puts additional pressure on me. And someone actually put high expectations in the feedback. So yes, definitely we would feel pressure from that from our learners. And then the exceptions to language rules are hard to work with. Lower level is more black and white. So by that we mean maybe the grammar rules or the grammar explanations are a bit more clearer for us to work with when we're sort of working around those A1, A2, CEFR levels, but maybe when we start to get to that higher C1 level, it can be a little bit more complex perhaps. So these are some what I would consider quite common examples of teacher anxiety experienced at advanced level, and it was really great to see that actually you guys shared a lot of these as well. So we're just going to have a think about how we can combat teacher anxiety at this level. And I think one thing that sounds quite simple but can be quite effective is to always try out tasks yourself. I remember trying out tasks myself to check the timing of my lessons when I was doing my lesson plans. But actually, there's more to trying out activities than the logistical insights. So it can also make you more aware of the skills and the mental processes needed to complete tasks. And, you know, if English language is not your first language, this might be an even more useful activity for you to do prior to passing it on to your students. Another area to help combat teacher anxiety is using the teacher guides if you're using a course book to deliver your lessons. I will be honest, when I was a teacher, I didn't always use the teacher guides of the course book that I was using. It's really only since I've started working for Oxford University Press that I've realised the wealth of support that's available through a teacher guide. I can see Ahmed said definitely. So Ahmed, I hope that you see the value in them more than I did when I was teaching. So yeah, teacher guides that accompany course books, they can provide tips, ideas, important information, all of this stuff to support the delivery of the course you're using. So here I've pulled out an example of an activity. This is a listening and speaking activity. It's from the advanced level of English File 4th edition. And you'll see that the opening task for this activity is to read the book titles. I can see some of you have popped some of these book titles, Anna, To Kill a Mockingbird, into the chat box already. And what the task is asking you to do is for your learners to have a look at these book titles and say whether they've read any of these books before. So we're sort of engaging that schemata with our learners. But, you know, this is a task that it's quite simple for our learners to achieve. Probably our lower level learners could manage something like this. So if we wanted to extend this to maybe make it a little bit more challenging for our learners, we could turn to our teacher guide and look at the support that's in there. So we can extend this task in particular by following what we call the extra idea or extra support boxes in our teacher guide. So here we can see the extra idea for this activity is asking our learners to focus on the lesson title. And we're going to ask them what they think an open book means when you use it to describe somebody. Now, I noticed that a lot of people had put idioms and colloquial language as an area that can be a bit challenging in the chat box. So this is a really great example here of an idiomatic expression or colloquial phrase. that we use to describe people. Does anybody want to tell me, what do we mean by an open book when we're using it to describe a person? Transparent, yes. Easy to read, honest, easy to understand. Nothing to hide. Yeah, very good, exactly. So I always think that teaching idiomatic language is a really lovely thing to do at this level, and it really shows the level of proficiency of your language when you're using such phrases. So this really helps to sort of extend that task from identifying these book titles, have you read these books, to let's think about when we use idiomatic phrases which contain book or words associated with reading, and what do they mean? We look at the extra support here. So it's got read through the script and decide if you need to pre-teach any new lexis before the students listen. So this here is very much a tip for you as the teacher. And again, it's diving in on that vocabulary. And you might find that there's room for extension there by taking particular words and maybe finding more vocabulary associated with them, or more colloquial phrases associated. So already we've made the opening for this listening and speaking task more level appropriate. Moving on. Another way that we can combat teacher anxiety is to ensure that we are the ones guiding the lessons. Whilst we encourage learner autonomy at advanced level, and we encourage our students to take control of their own study development, remember that you are still their teacher. So ensure that you're covering as much new and relevant content. Use tests and ongoing assessment to determine what these areas for focus might be, and make sure that you keep control of that. You are the teacher, and your students are still going to look up to you for advice and for guidance, and no one is going to know those weak spots in our students' development better than you, their teacher. One last point I want to bring up on how to combat teacher anxiety is to be honest. There is no shame in saying to a student that you don't have the answer for them right there at that time, but you will find out and get back to them. I understand that this could possibly impact differently depending on your culture, but I think that by showing that we as teachers have no shame in not being exactly clear on what the answer is, we're encouraging an environment for our learners to be honest about what they don't know. So you're setting this positive example, and you're creating this safe space for your learners. I can see Jenny's asked a really good question about how we can assess our learners' progress and achievement online. And yeah, that's really challenging at the moment, Jenny. I think there was a session with ELT together. I don't know if it's taken place already, about assessing our learners. But we'll address that question again at the end and come back to that. And maybe in the meantime, Natasha might be able to confirm if we've got a session, or we'll have a session about that. Okay. So learner fatigue. So guys, over to you again. I'm going to give you a few minutes. I want you to type into the chat box, what do we mean by learner fatigue? Great. Demotivated, too much exposure to grammar. I think that would make us all fatigued. Too much information at one time, exhaustion, boring lessons, yeah, boredom. This student definitely looks bored. That's not what we want to see when we look out into our classroom, is it? No interest anymore. Yeah, Anna, totally. The same teacher and same techniques over a long period of time. Yes, definitely. Unwillingness to participate. Great. Very good. Yeah, very good. Fantastic. Really good feedback, guys. So lots about demotivation, boredom, I guess getting stuck in patterns and maybe, you know, not having anything interesting, not injecting anything new or different approaches to engage sort of interest and refresh the learning environment. Okay, so here's a couple of things that I pulled out. So a learner could feel fatigued if they feel, I've already studied this, maybe I already know it, I don't feel like there's anything more to know about this. I need a new challenge. Again, a lot of people were talking about how it can be a bit boring, a bit same old, it needs something new and something a little bit different. Maybe they feel like they're not interested in these topics that they've been covering anymore. And that kind of leads on to this. I need more personalized lessons. And you might find that at advanced level, learners know exactly why they need that language proficiency and what they need it for. Maybe they need it for work, maybe they need it for traveling, but whatever their needs are, they could vary to the peers in their classroom and the other students. So we're going to think about some ideas on how we can combat learner fatigue. The first set of ideas we're going to think of is using a Coursebook approach. Here is an activity that I've pulled from English for Advanced Plus. So does anybody know this game? Just a minute. Can you type yes in the chat box if you know this game? A few yeses. Majority no. A few more yeses. Okay, so this game requires you to speak fluently about a subject for 1 minute. So, for example, I could give you the subject of dogs, and I'm going to ask you to talk about dogs fluently for 1 minute. Sounds quite easy, but actually it's a lot more difficult than you think because there are some rules to this activity. So the rules are no repetition. You can't repeat the same words or the same phrases apart from dog. No deviation, so you can't go off on a tangent. Maybe you start talking about taking a dog to a park and then you start talking about parks and green spaces and outdoors. Nope, you can't do that. No hesitation, no you'll be out. So for 1 minute, fluent talking. And yes, Michael, it is a BBC programme, yes. You can tune in on the BBC Radio to listen to it. I think BBC Radio 4. It's a very fun programme to listen to and I highly recommend it. So this activity has been taken from there and the rules are a little bit different from this version. So the other players, they are responsible for spotting any mistakes. But the mistakes themselves, they just focus on 3 areas that are key in communicative practice. Does anyone want to have a guess at the 3 areas that this activity might focus on? Pronunciation, vocabulary, fluency, vocab, cognition. Very good. So they're actually grammar, vocabulary, well done if you put vocabulary, and pronunciation, well done if you put pronunciation as well. So in this activity, in English Vowel 4th Edition Advanced Plus, these are the 3 areas that students have to consider when they're doing this activity. And these are the 3 areas where they're not allowed to make any mistakes. So yeah, well done if you guessed correctly. But for all the other suggestions that you've made, and I think, yeah, Michael, fluency, I would say is a really important one as well. You know, feel free to add them in. One thing that's really great about teaching advanced level is that this level allows for adaptation. So I think another nice thing about having an activity like this is it's quite fun. So that can be quite engaging for your learners. Moving on. So at advanced level, course books will usually approach learning by often incorporating suggestions for games, like I just mentioned with Just a Minute. But also opportunities for personalised activities, maybe research projects or project work. And this approach, it really harmonises with this level as it supports teachers in the use of their own ideas to extend or supplement the coursebook. So this provides a really great opportunity for personalisation and helping to engage and inspire our students, but also to challenge them as well. So at this level, you'll also find that the content in coursebooks is richer. So text can become more dense, as we can see in this example here. Again, this is taken from the Advanced Plus level of English Vowel 4th Edition. So by having coursebooks using more lengthy and richer texts, you often find that these are more authentic texts. So they haven't been abridged or they haven't been graded for their language. And this will also be the case with listenings as well. So the added bonus to this is that it saves you, the teacher, time trying to find content that is challenging and coherent to the theme of the lesson. I know that when I was teaching, and if I knew the topic that I was teaching and I just needed to find a suitable listening or a suitable text, that would take me a long time. So this really is such a great time-saving way of just by using a coursebook at an appropriate level. And I think when teachers feel the need to source their own authentic materials for an advanced level class, the lessons can become rather kind of bitty. So there's value in this. However, that being said, there is of course value in using standalone authentic materials that move away from coursebooks. So we will explore these too. So one thing I wanted to talk to you guys about was project-based activities and how project-based activities can combat learner fatigue. And these are just some ideas that I want to share with you. So if you as teachers do decide to move away from the coursebook, then authentic material is a great solution to providing content at the relevant pitch, and it requires less adaptation from you as the teacher. For example, you don't have to grade the language at this level. That being said, do consider that you want content that is pitched quite high because it is advanced learning. So project-based activities can be a really good way to help create a lesson that flows, addresses learners' needs for personalisation, and adheres to topics that they are interested in. You might find they're not interested in topics in the coursebook that are covered, but if they can tell you what they want to learn about, then you can go and source that. They also provide opportunities for both synchronous and asynchronous learning, and I think that's something that's probably really important in the current situation. So here are just a few ideas of activities that you could do and some of the benefits that come from them. So the first idea is analysing a news story. So this is a really great way of using authentic material, but it also draws upon our learners' global skills. So, for example, you could use critical thinking skills to identify what is fake news. And through this, you can express your opinions on maybe subjects in the media. Another idea, mock interviews. Not sure if anyone's done mock interviews before, but these type of activities, they encourage peer review, which I think is something you should really be encouraging at this level, maybe even before this level. They also help to develop fluency, and they can double up as general English and exam preparation practice. So that whole idea of you conversing with someone and responding instantly to questions that you might be asked. I can see Sibel said students love mock interviews. Yeah, that's been my experience too. And I think it's good to add that extra challenge of getting learners to prepare their own questions to ask their peers, and those peers not knowing what those questions might be. It really mimics that real world scenario of being in an interview. There's so much you can prepare, but when it comes to it, you don't know exactly what you might get asked. Another idea for project-based activities could be to produce a video. This is something that I used to do with my advanced teenage learners, and I found it really engaged them and also gave them a reason to use their mobile phone for learning by using the video function on that. So these type of creative activities, they can provide engagement and enjoyment for your learners. And an activity like this transfers well into the online classroom. So, for example, remote learners can use their mobile phone to record videos, and then they can share them with their peers and teacher, and even edit them if they have the capabilities to do that, and if that's something that they have access to. If a teacher is unsure on how to utilize platforms and products to allow for video editing or video sharing, then I would strongly suggest that you guys make this a learning goal for yourselves. So think about having professional development workshops with the other teachers in your school, and maybe just pick one platform that you can analyze and practice on each other. I think that's really important. I know that that's definitely something that I did a lot of when I was first getting to grips with some of the online platforms I've been using over the last few months. So taking advanced lessons into the online classroom, it may feed further into teacher anxiety, which I totally understand if you're not confident in using technology. But if we refer back to combating teacher anxiety, we looked at earlier on in the session, by trying out the activities and tasks yourself, you know, the same applies to platforms. So it's really important to try them out if you're going to be delivering learning virtually, and to get comfortable with it. And again, to make sure you feel like you're the one guiding the lesson and you're the one leading the way. And I can see some people are sharing some really wonderful ideas in the chat box. Avita said that her students interviewed each other and created a magazine article. I think that's wonderful. And Katie's done making and filming presentations as well. Elizabeth said, I have some problems with project-based activities because there is always a team member who doesn't work. And yes, I can understand how that can be problematic. I think it's finding what that team member responds well to. I was having a conversation with a colleague about this recently. And you know, some students, they respond really well to some kind of grading in the activities or lessons that they're doing. They want to know they're going to get a good result from the teacher. So I think if you make it clear that whilst project work is a team event, you as a teacher are going to be assessing each individual student, the input they put into the tasks and the project, and the way that they collaborate, make it a thing about global skills, then that might be something that would help those maybe more reluctant learners respond better to things that are project-based. Okay. So lastly, we're going to have a look at this thing that we call the Learner Plateau, and think about how learners can be affected by this plateau at advanced level. So many of us are aware of learners reaching a plateau in their learning around intermediate level, but this plateau can also occur at advanced level too. So learners may feel that they're not making any improvements with their language abilities, or that there's no visible progress to be had at this level. So with this, you can start to notice maybe dips in your learners' motivation, and some learners may even become complacent on this plateau, which makes it really difficult for them to identify areas for improvement, and maybe for yourself as well, and tricky for them to take control of their learning. So you have this lack of learning autonomy. So these are just a few areas that can affect learners when they hit this plateau. And yes, as Elizabeth says, they can become too comfortable at this level and almost become a bit kind of passive in their learning instead of active. Patricia says some students complain that they sometimes feel stuck in the learning process, and that's exactly it, Patricia. That's what we mean by this plateau. So yeah, totally, you've hit the nail on the head there. So let's think about some areas where we can help our learners combat this plateau. So here are just a few areas that we can consider. CEFR, or Common European Framework of Reference, have descriptors, also referred to as can-do statements. So why not try using the CEFR to discuss learning objectives and encourage motivation? The CEFR can be accessed freely from Council of Europe website. There is a link there on the slide. And we'll try and get one sent out afterwards. Sorry, I know it's a little bit small. If you search for Council of Europe, you should be able to find it on the internet. So this can be accessed freely, and you have some general English courses. For example, the latest publications of English Flow and Headway, they actually have the CEFR can-do statements matched to the tasks within the course book. And what I would often do when I was teaching was I'd maybe have either a physical or digital document with those can-do statements that I would share with my students. And I'd encourage them to look through the document and tell me, what can you do? What can you do at this level? What can-do statements apply to you? So that can really help for motivation. We mentioned a little bit earlier about self and peer evaluation. So get learners to evaluate their own performance and also that of their peers. and help make progress more visible, and also encourage learner autonomy. So when we talk about making progress more visible, I think, we want it to be something that we can discuss. And if you're able to reflect on your own learning, I know that's quite challenging. It's something that, I feel like is something you can work on yourself as a learner, and teachers can encourage that, and you guys can encourage your own learners to reflect on their progress. Peer evaluation as well is something that needs to be worked on. We can't just expect our students to know how to reflect on their peers in a supporting manner. You have to be careful sometimes about any criticism that you pass on to peers. So you can almost make this an activity within itself. How do we give effective feedback? And let's practice doing that with each other. I think personalization has come up a lot and been mentioned a lot throughout this session. So one way we can help our learners to combat that learner plateau is ensuring that they have personalized goals. So get your students to set personalized goals as a way of reflecting on their needs. And this feeds further into promoting learner autonomy, but again, it draws into that thing I mentioned earlier about students having different reasons for learning. Maybe they need to pass an exam, maybe they need the language for a particular job they're going on to do, or maybe it's to help them in their journey of education that they're still on, to get into that class or that level that they want to be at. So get them to write those goals down, and maybe even go back into the CEFR descriptors and line their personal goal up with that and see where they need to aim for, and giving them that golden carrot. And then the last thing I want to mention is this analysis and noticing. So encourage analysis and noticing, whether that's concrete language points, so for example, grammar points, or more abstract features, so for example, inferred meaning from a phrase or expression. And this kind of ties in again to what you guys were talking about earlier with using sort of idiomatic phrases and language, and what do we mean by them? And you can also extend this into areas of pronunciation and tone that we use when we're delivering a message, delivering a sentence, using particular vocabulary, and how that can change the meaning of what it is we're actually saying. Further areas to consider. So fossilisation, I'm sure you're all familiar with this term. So sometimes, unless a learner has reason to do so, a fossilised error may never be corrected. So if a learner can't recognise this themselves, then it might be something that the teacher needs to make the learner aware of. For example, if a teacher can see that a learner isn't clearly understood due to them struggling to grasp a specific aspect of pronunciation, then they could help their learner notice this error by maybe recording them, and then getting them to assess their pronunciation by listening back to the recording of themselves. I know when I was studying my degree, which actually my original studies were in music, I remember there was a particular song that I had to sing for a music performance I was doing as part of my studies. And it wasn't until I listened back to myself singing this song that I realized that actually one of the main lines in the song, in the chorus, I was pronouncing one of the words incorrectly, and I didn't notice this until I listened back to it myself, and that's in my own language. So this is a really useful tool, and also it's something, again, that our students can do remotely, and you know, can use their phones to record themselves and listen back. So it's really effective. One thing I do want to mention as well, that if your students are struggling with pronunciation, there's a really good app that they can use. It's called Say It. You might be familiar with Say It already. If not, I highly recommend checking it out, and that can really help your learners overcome those areas of pronunciation that they struggle with. I think pronunciation at this level is often the thing that gets fossilized. Another thing that I want to highlight is the effective filter hypothesis. So this also ties into learner fatigue. So your learners may be at a stage in their schooling where they're just bored with learning a second language, and this lack of motivation can easily hinder their language acquisition. So at this level, learners should be able to engage in more sophisticated topics in the language classroom. So bring the focus back to them and get them to make suggestions for what they want to study. If they're bored of the language focus itself, bring in elements of CLIL to make the content more subject-based, encourage project work to direct the focus onto the social skills needed to work together, and make English language the backdrop to the production of these activities instead of it being something there at the forefront. So instead of saying, we're going to do this grammar activity, say, we're going to discuss climate change, for example. The 4 stages of learning is the next area I want to talk about. This is something that I really focused on when I was doing my Delta. So it can also be known as the conscious competence learning model. And this is really bedded in psychology, but I think it's drawn upon a lot in the process of learning. And the main principles, they really focus around self-awareness. So when we think about a learning journey, these are the stages that we tend to move through. So we have our unconscious incompetence. And this may relate to those unknown fossilized errors, possibly. Then we move on to, I use my pointer here. Then we move on to conscious incompetence. So this might be where a learner is aware that they have L1 interference with a certain grammatical structure, possibly. Then we might move on to conscious competence. So this could be that the learner knows a range of colloquial phrases, but they have to concentrate when it comes to using them in context and when holding fluent conversation. And sorry, my arrow's getting all over the place. And then we finish with unconscious competence, where it just comes very naturally to us. We don't have to think about it too much. So these are all further areas to consider, and definitely further areas where you could read more about them. And again, I'd sort of, recommend, using that time that you have as a teacher when it comes to your own professional development or CPD sessions, to spend time on these areas to if it's going to help with the learners that you're currently working with. And I just wanted to share this quote with you. So this is by Amanda Jeffries. Amanda Jeffries is the author of the OUP Focus paper, Focus on Teaching Advanced Learners. It is important to remind your students that learning is different at this level and often a matter of expanding and refining what they already know rather than constantly learning something new. I agree too, Jenny. So I think this is something that we should consider. You know, we don't always have to reinvent the wheel when we suddenly get to advanced learner level. And I think sometimes the difficulty can be, you know, expanding on what our learners already know but don't know fully, rather than introducing something completely new. Especially when it comes to those areas of, you know, tracking progress. It's so much easier to see progress when your student didn't know something previously and now they do know it or they are aware of it, than to take knowledge from a base level and build on that. Okay, so I can see there's been a few questions that have been popping into the chat box throughout the session, which is really great to see. I'm just going to go through my question box now. I can see that there are a lot, so I want to apologise in advance if I'm not able to get round to everybody's questions. Jenny, I remember your question about how to revise learner progress and achievement online, and I did see that Naomi shared something in the chat box about there being a session on that as part of the ELT Together event. So I'm hoping that you got that information. As Hamal's asked, what approaches are there to use to make speaking more challenging enough for advanced students? Or are there some reference books we can read? Yes, there are. And in fact, if I go to this next slide here, here you've got the, here we've got some further reading that's available. I'm hoping that you can see that. These are definitely some areas that I would recommend taking a read of. Katie has asked, can being online pose extra challenges? This is a really good question, Katie. And I feel like the many webinars and discussions that I've been involved in over the last few months have asked this question and has had very mixed responses. I think from a tech perspective, there are definitely challenges that are posed. But in terms of content, I think we just have to sometimes rethink how we present content in an online environment. But there's no reason why we can't use the same content we would in a face-to-face class. Larab has asked, what do you mean by more personalised lessons? So by a more personalised lesson, it's understanding what the student needs in order for them to maybe be more engaged in their learning journey, or in order for them to fill in those gaps in their knowledge. So it's specific to that learner instead of it being something that we roll out for the entire class. Paulus has said, is it a good, I'm guessing, idea to deliver advanced learning environment if the students achieve A2 to B1 for the proficiency English test? Well, normally when we talk about advanced level or advanced plus, we're looking at C1, C1 plus and the CEFR. So I would say no, I'd say that they've still got their intermediate level to accomplish, which we mentioned before, you know, that can provide a plateau for learners. So, you know, we don't want our learners to, you know, try running before they can walk. So I would say no. Another question from Mona. What to do with students who pretend to know everything and ask you what your lessons may add to them? Oh, wow, that's a tricky student. Well, I mean, testing is a way to see, what our learners do actually know and what they don't know. And I think it's important to present this to the learners and say, so we can see that there's gaps in your knowledge here and maybe areas that we need to work on. And again, I think, you kind of need to put it onto the student at this level and say, what do you need? You tell me. Try and get them to do that sort of self-reflection. Catherine's asked, what do you refer to an inspirational teacher? Oh, that's a good question, Catherine. I mean, I think if we all think back to our educational journeys and think about which teachers inspired us, I'm sure we were all inspired for different reasons. I remember my middle school teacher, Mr. Jacobs, was very inspiring for me because he brought great comedic value to the lesson, and through that we were able to learn, but understand that doesn't always resonate well with every student. So I think that's quite a subjective response and subjective question, but a lovely question nonetheless. Eleni's asked, at the time we are talking about international English, not British, American, etc., how can we manage pronunciation in this case? I mean, yeah, I used to do a lot of sessions over in Ireland, Republic of Ireland, on pronunciation, and obviously teachers in Ireland pronounce things differently to the way that I pronounce them. I think it's good to make students aware that different pronunciation can change form depending on where in the world you are. I would often make relevance to American pronunciation and British English pronunciation when I was teaching in the UK, just because I was familiar with it. I mean, you can't be expected to talk about all the different forms of pronunciation depending on where you are in the world. Even in the UK alone, I could travel for 2 hours in the pronunciation of what words and language changes. So I think it's something that we can make our learners aware of, but be consistent with the areas of pronunciation that you're going to focus on with your learners. And often when it comes to things like intonation, that doesn't, I want to say it doesn't always change, but I know someone's probably going to prove that that's not the case if you go to New Zealand. So, but often things like tone can still imply the same meaning and message. ATAX asked, are games suitable for advanced learners? I think so. I used to do games with my advanced students, and yeah, we had a grand time. I think don't let games lead the lesson. Let them be a nice cooler that you could do at the end of a lesson, instead of being at the forefront of the lesson or the main focus. But yeah, definitely. Vanessa's asked, what's the source again for the Coursebook Approach? So if you're on about what I was referencing in the slides, it was English File 4th edition Advanced Plus. Advanced Plus is the new level that's coming out in January, I believe. So we noticed that there was a demand in the market for higher level advanced teaching and coursebook support. So it's very exciting that we have a C1 plus level coming out. Gloria's asked a very good question. She's asked, how do we combat learner fatigue in a quarantine? So I think one thing that's very important is making sure that your students feel connected. And if you are able to have some kind of online forum where students can communicate with each other and also you as a teacher, that's really important to make them feel like they're part of something. And I think being able to give them tasks that they can do asynchronously. So by that, I mean they don't have to be in the live lesson. They can be doing learning and studying in their own time. It just gives them something to focus on and allows them to do something that they can then feed back on when they're back in for the live session. Wynne has asked, what kind of projects should be used for online teaching to advanced learners? So there's probably quite a few different projects that you could do. One thing that we talked about in this session were video recordings. So if you are delivering an online lesson, and this kind of ties into Gloria's question as well about giving our students something to do away from the live classroom. So maybe they want to I don't know, film an interview with a family member, if they're in quarantine and they can't leave their home, or maybe they want to I don't know, film one of the rooms in their house and talk about maybe doing I don't know, make a topic about interior design, and they can talk about what they would like to do with the room in their house or what they have done with it. So there's a few different things that you can do. I appreciate that you do have this kind of reliance on technology, but actually a lot of the stuff you can make quite simple. If, for example, you're doing, interviews, you can get your peers to connect with each other, maybe just on the phone, and interview each other and then feedback what they learned from the interview, how their peers responded to questions that they were asked. Martina's asked, what about one-to-one lessons related to project-based learning? Yeah, that's a really good question, Martina. How do you do project-based learning in a one-to-one lesson? Well, again, sort of things like mock interviews. I mean, you only need 2 people to be able to do an interview. And again, getting the learner to go off and do something asynchronously. They'll still be able to do this if it's a one-to-one lesson. It just means that when they come back to the live lesson, they've got the teacher all to themselves, which is rather lovely. And probably a really great opportunity to really encourage that self-reflection, self-evaluation. I can see that there are more questions, and unfortunately we've run out of time. So we could probably respond to these questions and possibly send them out in an email. I'm not sure if that's possible.
All right, so we'll ask the organizers, Charlotte, the people who are behind this great event, if we can do that. Yeah, and
great.
Yeah. All right, so excellent session, Charlotte. It was lovely to have your expertise shared with us. Thanks for attending, everyone. Just a reminder, you will get a certificate of attendance in your email with a copy of the slides Charlotte used and the session recording. So keep an eye out for the opportunity to share your thoughts on ELT together by opting in by clicking the button in the email. All right, we would love to hear from you, so make sure you help us with your feedback, and your feedback will be taken into account for future events. Yes, so thank you, everybody. Keep an eye out on your emails, and looking forward to seeing you in the next sessions. Bye.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming. Enjoy the rest of your days. Take care. See you next time. Bye.